Today, we're tackling one of the biggest questions out there, but from a totally different angle. We're going to explore a model of the afterlife that wasn't born from faith or philosophy, but from the personal, hands-on, experimental research of a physicist named Tom Campbell. All right, let's get into it. You know, it's the ultimate question, isn't it? It's something that has fascinated and maybe even scared humanity since the very beginning. What's next? Is there anything at all? We've heard answers from all kinds of people, but our source today comes from a much more unusual place. So, meet Tom Campbell. He's a physicist who has spent decades exploring what he calls non-physical realities. And how did he do it? Through repeatable, on-demand, out-of-body experiences. The important thing here is that his model isn't based on belief. It's based on what he says he has personally observed, over and over and over again. So, to really get our heads around this, here's our game plan. First, we'll look at his scientific approach. Then, we'll define the absolute core of his model, this idea of a consciousness system. From there, we'll actually follow the journey through life, see what he describes happens when we die, and finally, we'll get to the big one, what rebirth and reconnection might really look like in this model. Okay, so you're probably wondering, how on earth does a scientist even begin to study something like the afterlife? Well, Campbell's answer was to treat it just like any other physics experiment, with careful observation, lots of repetition, and by testing one variable at a time. Campbell says he developed the ability to go out of body whenever he wanted. He then used this skill to observe the dying process from a non-physical viewpoint again and again. And just like a scientist in a lab, he would change one tiny variable and see what happened. By doing this countless times and looking for results that were always consistent, he was able to build a working model of how this other reality seems to function. All right, before we can talk about the journey, we really need to understand the key players in this whole model. So let's quickly get familiar with the core concepts, because they're pretty important for everything that follows. So at the very top of everything is what he calls the larger consciousness system, or the LCS. You can think of it like the fundamental source code of reality, or maybe the game engine for a massive online video game. But here is the most crucial part. This is not some perfect, all-knowing supernatural God. He describes it as a natural information system that is itself learning, growing, and evolving. So where do we fit into all this? Well, Campbell says we are all individual pieces of this larger system. He calls each of us an individuated unit of consciousness, or an IOC. So if we stick with that video game analogy, if the LCS is the game engine, then you, your real eternal self, you're the player. Now, this is where it gets really, really interesting. To actually play the game of life, the player, the IOC, doesn't put its entire self into the game. Instead, it creates a character. It partitions off a little piece of itself that he calls a free will awareness unit, or FWAU. Think of it like starting a brand new video game at level 1. This character gets the spark, the quality of your consciousness, but, and this is key, it has absolutely none of the memories from your past games. Let's just make sure we're totally clear on the difference here. The IUOC, that's the player. That's the real you, the eternal consciousness that holds all the memories from every single experience you've ever had. The FWAU, on the other hand, that's the temporary character, the avatar for just one lifetime. It's a blank slate, and it completely believes it is the character it's playing because that's the only reality it's ever known. Okay, so we've got the system, we've got the player, and we've got the character. Now let's take a look at how these pieces all come together to create this experience we call life. According to this model, what we call incarnation is basically a log-on process. Your IUOC, the player, partitions off a new FWAU and connects it to a new avatar, usually a baby. And from that moment on, this new little unit of awareness starts receiving a data stream of experience from that physical body. I mean, think about it, right? If your entire existence, every single sight, sound, thought, and feeling you've ever had has come through the senses of one specific body, wouldn't you believe you are that body? That's the experience of the FWA. Its identity completely merges with its avatar, because that's the only reality it's ever known. So what happens when the game is over? When the avatar, the body, gets old and dies? Well, in this model, the process isn't an ending at all, but a transition. At the moment of physical death, that informational wall, That barrier between the temporary character, the FWAU, and the eternal player, the IUOC, it starts to dissolve. The awareness of that character is slowly and gently reabsorbed back into the larger consciousness that created it in the first place. Now, this whole reintegration process isn't instant. Campbell describes it as a journey with a few steps. First, you enter a transition reality, sort of a custom-made virtual space to help you de-stress and figure things out. Second, the memory of the life you just lived starts to fade, kind of like a dream. Third, you might meet guides to help comfort you. Fourth, you could undergo a life review to see what you've learned. And finally, you start planning your next experience packet, your next lifetime.
So what about those guides? Campbell's take on this is just fascinating. He says if you see a loved one, let's say your Uncle Fred, it isn't actually his current self. Instead, it's the larger consciousness system accessing its perfect data record of Uncle Fred and running a simulation of him, basically playing his part to provide a familiar, comfortable presence to help you relax and adjust.
And you might also get offered a life review. Now, this isn't about judgment, not at all. It's a learning tool. It's a way for your consciousness to see its own patterns, to see where you acted out of fear or ego or anger, so you can get a better sense of what you need to work on to keep evolving. And all of this brings us to the most human part of this entire equation. After we've made that transition, what happens next? And the biggest question of all, can we ever really, truly reconnect with the people we've lost? This is the one. This is the question that matters more than anything to so many of us. If the people we love are off on their own journeys, maybe they're already logged into a new life. Are they just gone from us forever? According to Campbell's model, the answer is yes, you absolutely can meet them again. But the way that happens is more complex and maybe even more profound than just a simple heavenly reunion. The key to all of this is something Campbell calls the past database. The idea here is that the larger consciousness system keeps a perfect, flawless, complete record of every person who has ever lived. And I don't mean just a highlight reel. We're talking a database of every single thought, every feeling, every choice, every dream they ever had. It is the complete, unchangeable informational pattern of exactly who they were. So when you reconnect with a loved one, you're not actually talking to their current avatar, who might be off living another life somewhere. Instead, you are accessing their perfect record from that database. The LCS then runs that data like an interactive simulation. It plays their part, perfectly constrained by their actual personality and memories. And here's the kicker. To you, the experience is completely indistinguishable from interacting with the real person, because in an information-based reality, that perfect data is the person. So what this model really presents is life, not as some one-off event, but as a series of learning experiences in a virtual reality. And it's all designed for one single purpose, for consciousness itself to evolve, to grow up, to lower its entropy by overcoming fear, ego, and belief. It's a school for learning how to love. Which really just leaves us all with one final, very personal question to think about. What lesson is your avatar here to master?